I always believed silence could hurt more than words, but nothing prepared me for what I heard that Father's Day. It was a grey morning in Denver, the kind where the clouds feel heavier than usual, pressing against the windows like they're trying to crawl inside. I had made a fresh pot of coffee, the smell filling the kitchen as I paced nervously. Claire said she'd come by around noon. That alone felt like a miracle. We hadn't spoken properly in almost 2 years. When she finally walked through the door, it was like time froze. She wore a soft blue dress, the same color her mother once favored. Her eyes, big and tired, looked nothing like the little girl who used to braid her doll's hair on the living room floor. She was a woman now, and she looked guarded. "Happy Father's Day," she said, placing a small gift bag on the table. "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, trying to smile. My hands were already trembling. "Would you like some coffee?" She shook her head, barely meeting my eyes. She sat on the couch stiffly, like she was preparing herself for something heavy. I took the armchair across from her, heart thudding in my chest. The clock on the wall ticked, 12:06. Each second sounded louder than the last. "I'm glad you came," I said quietly. It felt like I was talking to a stranger who used to be my daughter. She took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the window, and then, without looking at me, she said it. "I almost didn't, but I figured maybe it's time to tell you how I really feel." "Tell me," I said, unsure of what was coming, but knowing it wouldn't be easy. She turned to me, and there was a weight in her stare I hadn't seen before. "You were never there for me, Dad." The words landed like a hammer to the chest. I tried to speak, but she raised her hand. "No, just listen, please." I nodded, stunned, silent. "You weren't at my birthdays. You weren't at my school plays. You weren't there when Mum would scream at me over nothing. I cried in my room so many nights just wishing you'd come knock on my door. But you never did." She blinked back tears, and my throat burned with the things I wanted to say. "You vanished, Dad, and even when you were physically there, it felt like your soul had packed up and left." I lowered my eyes. The pain in her voice, it was the kind of wound that never quite scabs over. "I went off to college feeling like I had no one," she continued. "Like even having your last name didn't mean anything. You were just a ghost in my life." I took a shaky breath. My fingers gripped the edge of the chair. "Claire, do you know who paid for your college?" She looked confused, her brow furrowing. "Mum said I got a scholarship." I let out a soft, bitter laugh. One tear slipped down my cheek. "No, sweetheart, it wasn't a scholarship. Your father paid every penny of your tuition. Every class, every book, every meal plan. I just couldn't be there, and you never knew why." Claire stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. The silence that followed wasn't like before. It was loaded now, heavy with questions, accusation, confusion. "You paid for it?" she finally said, her voice low, almost disbelieving. I nodded slowly. "But why didn't you ever tell me?" I exhaled. That question had haunted me more nights than I could count. I had practiced the answer in my head 100 times, written it down in letters I never sent. "I wanted to," I said. "God knows I wanted to. But your mother, things were complicated." Claire shifted in her seat. "That's always your answer. Things were complicated. That doesn't explain why you disappeared." She was right. It didn't explain the silence, the empty seats at school events, the birthdays missed. It didn't explain the aching absence she carried in her chest. But what could I say? That her mother and I had spiraled into something so bitter, so quietly toxic, that staying near would have burned us both alive. That I had been pushed so far out of the picture, I started to believe maybe I didn't deserve to be in it. "I didn't stop loving you," I whispered, "even when I wasn't there. Especially then. I stayed away because I thought it would be better for you." Claire looked down at her hands. She didn't cry, but something in her face softened, a crack in the armor. "I didn't want your life to be a battleground," I continued. "Every time I tried to come closer, your mother made it clear it would only make things harder for you. So I found another way to be there, quietly, in the background." She didn't speak. She just kept her eyes fixed on the floor, like she was processing it piece by piece. I read every report card you brought home, I said. Your mom didn't know I had a copy of the login. I watched your graduation online from the back row. I even drove to your campus once just to see where you'd be living, but I didn't get out of the car. My voice cracked on that last part. The shame of it, after all these years, still cut like glass. Claire finally looked up. You mean you were watching all this time? I nodded. Yes, always. She blinked slowly, like the truth was trying to rearrange something in her mind. I wrote you letters, I added, hundreds, but I never sent them. I was afraid they'd make things worse or that you'd tear them up without reading. Her face twitched, a mixture of surprise and something else. Maybe sadness, maybe anger, maybe both. I have a box in the garage, I said. All those letters, if you ever want to read them, they're yours. She didn't respond. Her eyes glazed over slightly, and I could tell she was somewhere far away, maybe back in her dorm room wondering where I had been all those nights she felt alone. Finally, she whispered, "Why didn't you fight harder for me?" That question gutted me. I had no good answer, only truths that hurt. I didn't think I was worth keeping, I said, but I never stopped loving you, never, not once. Claire leaned back into the couch, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. I could see her jaw tense, the same way it used to when she was a child trying to hold back tears. I always wondered why you just disappeared, she said. But Mom never talked about it. Whenever I asked, she'd say you made your choice, that you left us. I closed my eyes. That sentence echoed in my memory. You made your choice. I remembered hearing those very words from Claire's mother the night I moved out. We had been fighting for months, quietly at first, then loudly enough for Claire to hear through her bedroom walls. And then, one night, it all exploded. I didn't want you to grow up around hate, I said gently. Your mother and I, we became toxic. We stopped being people around each other. It was like everything we touched turned into blame. I thought if I stepped back, it would give you a chance to breathe. You thought disappearing would make things better, she snapped. I needed a father, not a ghost. Her voice was sharp, but it shook under the weight of grief. I know, I said quietly. I was wrong. Claire stood up and began pacing, arms folded tightly around herself. You don't understand what it was like. Every school event, every parent-teacher conference, I'd look at the doors hoping maybe you'd walk in. And every time you didn't, I told myself not to care. I trained myself to stop expecting you. I swallowed hard. I remember in 6th grade we had a father-daughter day, she continued. I told my teacher you were away on a business trip, but you weren't. You just weren't around. I stood but didn't approach her. I kept my distance, letting her speak. I envied the other girls, the ones whose dads held their hands and brought them flowers. I wanted that. I wanted someone to tell me I was smart and strong and that I mattered. But instead, I learned how to pretend it didn't hurt. A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly. I thought I'd buried it all, she whispered. But seeing you today, it's like the grave cracked open. I felt the guilt rush in, raw, bitter, unrelenting. I had been trying to do the right thing by staying away, but all I had done was leave a little girl to make sense of a broken family by herself. I don't expect forgiveness, I said. I just wanted you to know the truth. She looked at me, her eyes tired and wet. The truth doesn't fix the years I spent waiting. It doesn't fix prom night when I cried in the bathroom because you didn't call, or when I got my acceptance letter and looked at my phone, hoping you'd somehow just know. I did know, I said, barely able to speak. Your mum told me. I cried in my truck for hours that day, but I didn't call because I thought I'd ruin it. I thought you hated me. Claire looked down, silent. She didn't argue, and maybe part of her had. We both stood there in the space between a wound and its healing, unsure of what came next. I watched Claire as she stood by the window, arms still wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold in years of resentment. I had never seen her like this, so exposed, so honest, so brave in her anger. I used to stare at my phone too, I said after a long silence. Every Father's Day, every birthday. I thought about calling 100 times. Why didn't you? She asked. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes cut into me. Because I thought I didn't deserve to hear your voice, I said. I figured you'd hang up, or worse, that you wouldn't answer at all. Claire looked away. I might not have. I know. We stood in the silence again. The kitchen clock ticked. A car passed outside. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The world moved on, indifferent to the reckoning happening in my living room. I wrote your number down on a piece of paper, I continued. Kept it in my wallet for years. Wore through the edges, reading it, touching it, but never dialing. She turned slowly. That sounds cowardly. It was, I admitted, but it was also love. Twisted, afraid love. I thought leaving space was the only thing I could offer you that wouldn't add more pain. She sat down again, this time softer, less guarded. I remember my graduation day, she said, voice distant. I looked at every face in the crowd, every single one. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd show up. I was there, I said quietly. I sat in the back, near the exit. I left before the ceremony ended. Her eyes widened. What? I watched you walk across that stage, I said, my throat tightening. I was so proud I couldn't breathe, but I also felt like a stranger, like I had no right to celebrate you. Her hand went to her mouth. I saw the disbelief flicker across her face. I even brought you a gift, I added, a leather journal. I wrote a note inside, just a few lines. I left it in the mailbox at your dorm. I guess you never got it. She shook her head. No, I never saw anything like that. Maybe someone threw it out. Maybe your RA didn't know who it was for. Or maybe it just got lost like so much else between us. Claire's eyes were glossy now and she blinked rapidly, trying to stay composed. You were right there, she whispered. And I didn't even know. I nodded, too ashamed to say more. We sat in that painful recognition, the space between us still charged, but no longer hostile. There was something else now, the fragile beginning of understanding. Like a light flickering at the end of a tunnel, neither of us knew we'd been walking. I guess we were both haunted, I said. Me by what I didn't do, you by what you thought I never wanted. She looked at me. So what now? I didn't have an answer, but for the first time in years, I wanted to find one. I don't know what now looks like, I said slowly, but I know what I've always wanted to say. Claire didn't interrupt. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, eyes locked on mine. I could see the war inside her, the part that wanted to believe me and the part that had protected her all these years from exactly that. I'm sorry, I said, not just for leaving, but for staying away, for missing the parts of your life that mattered most, for letting my fear be louder than my love. Her face twitched, and she looked away for a moment, but she didn't stop me. I used to write those words over and over in the letters, I continued, but somehow, saying them to your face, it feels heavier. Claire's eyes shimmered, and I saw her grip the edge of the couch cushion with both hands. I thought about you every day, I said. Every day, Claire, even when it didn't seem like it. I memorized your school schedule from the little newsletters your mum used to forward. I knew what days you had math tests. I knew when you were on the school paper. I even kept a photo of you at age 10 in my glove compartment. It was all I had. She swallowed hard, but still didn't speak. I didn't stop being your father, Claire. I just stopped being the kind you could see, and I hate myself for that. Her voice, when it came, was so soft I almost missed it. I thought you stopped caring. My chest tightened. I never did, I said. Not for 1 second. She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. I spent so many years telling myself it didn't matter, she whispered, that if I just worked hard enough, got good enough grades, did everything right, I wouldn't need you. And did it work? I asked gently. She gave a bitter little laugh. No, it just made me more angry. I reached into my pocket and pulled out something I had brought just in case. A faded photograph. It was of her and me, taken when she was 4, both of us smiling by a lake in Colorado. I held it out to her. She stared at it for a long time before taking it. "I've carried that with me since the day I left," I said. "It reminded me of a time when I hadn't messed everything up yet." She ran her finger along the edge of the photo. "I remember this day," she said. "You let me wear your baseball cap, and I dropped my sandwich in the water." I smiled. "You cried like it was the end of the world." She gave the smallest smile back, but it was real, and it hurt just as much as it healed. "I don't know if we can fix this," she said quietly. "I don't either," I admitted, "but I'd like to try." She looked at me, long and hard, and for the first time that day her eyes weren't full of fire. They were full of something much harder to define, something like hope. The photo lay in Claire's lap like a fragile relic, a piece of a world that no longer existed, but maybe, just maybe, could still mean something. "Trying," she said softly. "Feels like more than I ever expected from you." I nodded. "It's all I can offer." She ran her fingers over the corner of the photograph, her eyes drifting back to mine. "You know," she said, "Mom wasn't perfect either, but for the longest time, she was all I had, and she never let me forget it." I didn't speak. I knew better than to defend or accuse. That wasn't what today was about. "She told me once that love had to be earned," Claire continued, "that people don't just get forgiven, they have to suffer a little first." My chest ached hearing that. I had always worried the bitterness between her mother and me would leak into Claire's heart, and now here it was, another wound I had no idea she'd been carrying. "She was wrong," I said gently. Claire looked up. "Love doesn't have to be earned," I said. "At least not from a parent to a child. You didn't have to prove anything, Claire. You just had to exist. That was always enough for me." Her eyes welled up again, but she blinked the tears back quickly. "I used to imagine what it would be like to hear you say something like that," she whispered. "But when it didn't happen, I just assumed it wasn't true." I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. "I missed so much," I said. "First crushes, first heartbreak, all the little things, picking you up from practice, teaching you how to drive. I'll never get those back, and I don't expect you to forgive me for that overnight." Claire was quiet, her breathing shallow. "But if forgiveness means starting again," I added, "if it means letting me sit beside you instead of behind you, I'll be here, however long it takes." She stared at me for a long time, like she was trying to see past the years, past the versions of me she had built in her head. "Do you still have the letters?" she asked. I nodded. "Every single one. I want to read them." Those 4 words felt like a door creaking open after being locked for decades. "I'll bring them to you," I said, "whenever you're ready." Claire exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for years. "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel right now," she said. "It's like part of me wants to scream, and part of me wants to fall asleep in your arms like I used to when I was little." I smiled gently. "You don't have to know what to feel. Just let it come." She nodded slowly, then looked at me with something that felt dangerously close to tenderness. "This doesn't mean I forgive you, not yet. I understand. But I'm not walking away either." A single tear rolled down my cheek, and I didn't bother to wipe it. For the first time in years, I felt like her father again. 2 days after that conversation, I stood in my garage, staring at the old cardboard box I hadn't touched in years. It sat beneath a dusty tarp, next to a stack of forgotten holiday decorations and rusting tools, like a time capsule I'd buried out of fear. My hands trembled as I pulled it out. The top was caved in slightly, water-stained from a leak I never fixed. But the letters inside were still there, bundled by rubber bands, each stack dated by year. 2007, 2008, 2009, all the way to 2018. I sat on the concrete floor and opened the first one. "Dear Claire," it began in my messy handwriting. "You're 5 today. You asked for a pink bicycle and I hope you got it. I remember the first time I taught you to ride. You were fearless, just like your mother." My eyes burned. I read a few more, skipping through the years. I saw your school play online. You were amazing. You looked nervous, but I could tell you remembered every line. I heard you made the honor roll. I'm proud of you, even if I can't say it out loud. I wanted to call you tonight. I don't know why I didn't. I guess I'm scared you won't remember my voice." Every letter was a confession, a cry, a desperate hope that someday, somehow, I'd get to say these things to her face. I put them back in the box, carefully, as if they were sacred. Then I added one more. Fresh ink, clean paper. "Dear Claire, I never imagined you'd ask to read these. I thought they would die in this garage, just like the version of me I was trying to protect you from. But maybe there's more to us than I believed. Maybe these words will finally find their way home." I sealed the box and drove to her apartment that evening. The lights were on in the window. She lived in a modest building, 3rd floor, just off Colfax Avenue. I hadn't been there before. When I knocked, she opened the door cautiously. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her face makeup-free, vulnerable. "I brought them," I said, holding out the box. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she stepped aside to let me in. Her living room was small but clean and warm. A bookshelf full of old novels, a framed diploma, and a picture of her and her mom, but none of me. I didn't blame her. She placed the box on her coffee table and stared at it like it might bite. "Are you okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm ready to read them all, but I want to try." I sat down across from her. "Take your time," I said. "They're yours now." She opened the lid, pulled out the first bundle, and untied the rubber band. As she unfolded the paper, I saw her lips tremble. She read silently. And as the minutes passed, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Softness. Halfway through the second letter, she looked up. "You wrote to me every birthday?" "Every single one," I said. "Even when I didn't know where you were, I just needed to talk to you." Claire blinked, tears slipping down her cheeks now freely. She didn't wipe them away. "You really never stopped caring," she whispered. "No," I said, my own voice cracking. "Not for a moment." She didn't say anything else. She just kept reading. And for the first time in our long fractured history, we sat together in the quiet. Not as strangers, not as ghosts, but as father and daughter. The next time Claire invited me over, it was for dinner. Just the two of us. No special occasion. No reason given. She simply texted, "Dinner at 7." And I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes before answering. When I arrived, I brought flowers. I didn't know if that was too much or not enough, but it felt right. She opened the door with a faint smile, took the bouquet without a word, and motioned for me to come in. The apartment smelled like roasted vegetables and garlic, something homey, something I hadn't smelled in her presence in decades. We sat at a small wooden table by the window. The plates were mismatched. The silverware was the kind you collect over years, one piece at a time. Her world was simple, quiet, self-built. "Smells amazing," I said. "Don't get too excited. It's just pasta." I happen to love pasta. She smiled faintly, but it faded as quickly as it came. There was still a heaviness between us, not like before, but it lingered, like a third presence at the table, a ghost of all the years I missed. We ate in near silence. She asked about work. I told her I was semi-retired, mostly consulting from home. She mentioned a colleague she didn't like and rolled her eyes. I laughed, and she didn't flinch. For a while, it felt almost normal. But halfway through the meal, she put down her fork and looked at me with the same directness she had that first day. "Do you ever think about what we could have had? If things had been different?" Her question knocked the air from my chest. "All the time," I said. "Me too." She picked at her napkin, folding and unfolding it between her fingers. "I used to imagine us in a house by a lake," she said quietly. "You teaching me how to skip stones, us building a treehouse. It sounds stupid now, but..." "It doesn't," I interrupted. "It sounds beautiful." Her eyes welled up again, but she didn't cry. She was stronger than that, or maybe just used to holding it in. "I hated you," she said suddenly. "Not always, but for a long time. I hated you for leaving, for being invisible, for letting Mom decide everything." I nodded slowly. "I deserve that." She took a deep breath. "But I also hated myself, for missing you, for still wanting you around." Those words cut deeper than any accusation ever could. "I thought missing you meant I was weak," she whispered. "So I stopped saying your name, stopped asking questions. I buried you like a secret." My voice came out as a whisper. "I never stopped being your dad." "I know," she said. "But I didn't know how to be your daughter." We sat there surrounded by the invisible pieces of the life we didn't get to live. Birthdays we missed, school dances, bad jokes at the dinner table, shared traditions that never got created. "I can't go back," I said, "but I can be here now, if you'll let me." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand over mine. "I don't know if I can forgive everything," she said, "but I want to know who you are. Now." That was more than I'd ever expected, and somehow exactly what I needed. A few weeks passed after that dinner. We started talking more, slowly, cautiously, like two people rebuilding a bridge, one plank at a time. There were still pauses, awkward silences, moments where I'd say something and see a flicker of doubt in her eyes. But there was also laughter now, brief and hesitant, like it wasn't sure it belonged. One Sunday afternoon, I got a call from Claire. "Can we talk?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "You want me to come over?" "No," she replied. "Can you meet me at the cemetery?" It took me a second to process. "Your mother's grave?" I asked gently. "Yes." I arrived 20 minutes later, a bouquet in hand, unsure if it was appropriate, but unwilling to show up empty-handed. Claire was already there, standing by the headstone. It was simple, just her mother's name, dates, and the words, "Loved fiercely." "She died angry," Claire said, when I walked up beside her. "I know." "She never forgave you?" I nodded. "I never expected her to. She told me once that forgiveness was for fools, that some people don't deserve to be let back in. And do you believe that?" Claire looked down, her face unreadable. "I used to." We stood there in silence. I placed the flowers beside the headstone. I didn't pray. I didn't say anything out loud. I just stood quietly and let the weight of her memory settle around us. "I need you to understand something," Claire said suddenly. "This, us, it doesn't erase what she went through. I don't want you to think that just because we're talking now that I've forgotten how she cried at night, how bitter she became." I turned to her. "I haven't forgotten. I never will." "She felt abandoned, Dad. She felt like you chose freedom over family." "She was right," I said. "I did choose freedom, but not from you, from the war zone our house had become. I didn't know how to stay without making everything worse." Claire looked at me, and I could see the tension in her jaw. She wasn't defending her mother, not exactly, but she was still loyal to the version of her who raised her alone. "I don't want to rewrite history," I said. "Your mother loved you with everything she had. She did the best she could, but so did I. And sometimes our best still hurts the people we love." Claire didn't respond right away. She knelt beside the grave and brushed some fallen leaves off the top. "She always told me love had to be earned," she whispered. "But I think she said that because she didn't believe she was lovable, unless she worked for it." My chest tightened. "Maybe that's why I've been holding you at a distance," she added. "Because I thought if I let you back in too easily, it would be like betraying her." "You're not betraying anyone," I said softly. "You're healing, and so am I." She stood slowly, brushed dirt off her knees. "I'm not ready to say I forgive you," she said. "But I'm ready to stop letting her pain make all my decisions." That moment, standing beside the woman we both lost, acknowledging the scars she left behind, felt like a turning point. Not a clean break. Not a dramatic transformation, but something quieter, deeper, the beginning of letting go. That evening, after visiting the cemetery, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the wind tap against the window pane like it had something to say. My mind wandered, back through time, through memories I'd stored away like old furniture. Then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. A voicemail. It was from Claire, left sometime around her senior year of high school. I had missed the call. I think I was out of town on a consulting job, but I never deleted it. Never could. I pulled out the old phone from my dresser drawer. It barely held a charge anymore, but I kept it for that one message. I plugged it in, waited for it to boot, then scrolled through the old inbox. There it was. Claire, 2:13 a.m. I hit play. Hi. It's me. I don't know why I'm calling. I guess I thought maybe you'd answer. I was walking home from a party, and I saw this dad pick his daughter up, and I don't know, it just made me miss you. I'm angry at you, so angry, but I just wanted to hear your voice. Anyway, I'm fine. I guess I just needed to feel like you were still real. Okay, bye. It had been 43 seconds long, and I must have listened to it over 100 times since. That night, I transferred the recording to my laptop, just in case the phone ever died for good. Then I sat there staring at the screen, wondering if I should play it for her. I didn't want to use it as proof. I didn't want to say, "See, you did care." That wasn't the point. But part of me thought, maybe she needed to remember who she was in that moment. Vulnerable, reaching, still hoping. The next time I saw her, we were at a quiet cafe she liked near the Denver Art Museum. She ordered chamomile tea. I got black coffee. We didn't talk much at first, but it wasn't uncomfortable. After a while, I reached into my coat pocket. "There's something I've kept," I said. "A voicemail. From you." She looked up, eyebrows raised. "From when?" "High school. You probably don't remember, but it meant a lot to me." Her expression shifted, and I could see the hesitation. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I think you should hear the version of yourself that still believed in us, even when you were hurting." I handed her one of my earbuds and hit play. She listened, and as the message ended, she didn't speak for a while, just stared down at the table, her tea untouched. "I remember that night," she said finally. "I was walking back from Lindsay's house. It was cold. I was wearing your old hoodie, the one you left behind when you moved out." My throat tightened. "I felt stupid for calling," she added. "I thought I was being weak." "No," I said. "You were being brave." She looked at me, eyes shimmering. "I think part of me always wanted to forgive you, but I didn't know how." I reached across the table, rested my hand gently near hers, not touching, just close enough. "So you don't have to know how," I said. "Just keep showing up." She nodded. Then she did something I wasn't expecting. She slid her hand into mine. And just like that, something shifted again. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was faith. It was a Wednesday afternoon when it happened. Ordinary in every way. Blue skies over Denver, a crisp breeze, the kind that hinted autumn was thinking about returning. Claire had asked if I could help her move a bookshelf in her apartment. Something simple. Just the kind of thing a dad does. She opened the door wearing an old hoodie and jeans, hair pulled up barefoot. "You're early," she teased. "You said 3, I smiled. "It's 2:55. I take punctuality very seriously now." She rolled her eyes and stepped aside to let me in. The shelf was already emptied, books stacked on the floor labeled by genre, a habit she picked up from her mother. I grabbed one end while she took the other, and together we maneuvered the heavy thing against the far wall. "Not bad," I said, catching my breath. "Still got some muscle left in me." She smirked. "Barely." We shared a laugh, the kind that didn't feel forced. It settled in the room like sunlight, natural and warm. As I started helping her return books to the shelves, she handed me a small photo frame. It held a picture I hadn't seen in years, me and her at a state park, both covered in mud, grinning like fools. She was maybe 6. "I found this in an old box last night," she said. "Didn't even remember I still had it." I looked at the photo, then at her. "You were fearless that day, climbed every rock without a second thought." She shrugged. "I think I just wanted to impress you." I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my chest, too big, too fragile. "You already had," I finally whispered. She smiled, and for a second, I saw that little girl again, not in her face, but in her eyes, the softness, the quiet hope. We finished putting up the books and I turned to leave. "All right, I'll get out of your hair. Let the great organizer do her thing." She followed me to the door, arms crossed loosely. "Thanks for the help," she said. "Any time," I replied, stepping into the hallway. Then, just as the door started to close, I heard her voice. "Dad?" I stopped. Turned around slowly. She was leaning against the doorframe, looking down, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. "What did you say?" I asked gently. She looked up, her eyes wide, vulnerable. "I called you Dad." The word hung between us like a fragile bird, unsure if it should land or fly away. I stepped closer. "You haven't called me that in years." "I know," she said, a small laugh escaping, half embarrassed. "It just slipped out. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to ruin it by rushing in. I just stood there, letting the word echo." "You don't have to explain," I said finally. "You have no idea what it means to hear you say that." She looked like she might cry, and then, unexpectedly, she stepped forward and hugged me. Not a quick, polite hug, but something full, real. Her arms around me like she meant it. I held her gently, careful not to squeeze too tight. My heart felt like it might give out from the sheer force of gratitude. She pulled back after a moment and smiled. A real one this time. "See you later, Dad." "See you, sweetheart." And with that, she closed the door softly, leaving me standing in the hallway, stunned by the beauty of something I thought I'd lost forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, still hearing her voice. "See you later, Dad." A part of me wondered if it had really happened, or if my heart had conjured it in a moment of longing. But it was real. I had felt the hug. I had seen the tears in her eyes. It wasn't a dream. I got up, made tea, and sat in the dark kitchen with an old photo album I hadn't opened in years, the kind with sticky pages and faded Polaroids. Claire's face stared back at me from every page, gap-toothed smiles, Halloween costumes, birthday cakes, skinned knees and scraped elbows. 1,000 memories I thought time had buried, and behind every image, an ache. A moment I missed, a laugh I wasn't there to hear, a lesson I didn't get to teach. I flipped to the last page, blank except for one picture. Claire at 16, sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees. She wasn't smiling in that one. She looked tired, older than she should have been. I remembered taking that picture from my car across the street. She never knew I was there. That was the last day I saw her until she turned 25. I pressed my palm over the image. "I'm sorry," I whispered, to the version of her who had cried alone, to the version of me who had disappeared. The next day she called. Not texted, and called. "I've been reading more of the letters," she said. "I'm on the ones from my college years now." I held my breath. "They're hard to read," she continued. "Not because I'm angry, but because you sound like someone I wish I had known back then." "I was someone I didn't know how to be," I said quietly. There was a pause. "You talked about driving by campus, about sitting in the parking lot and watching me walk to class, that's true?" "Yes." "And the care packages? I mailed them under a friend's name so your mother wouldn't trace them back to me." Claire laughed softly. "I always wondered who Henry Jameson was. He was my old roommate in college. I figured you'd think it was just some scholarship sponsor." I did. Another silence. But this one felt different, less tense, more reflective. "Dad," she said. It still startled me hearing that word again. "Do you think we'll ever feel normal?" I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said honestly. "But maybe that's not the goal. Maybe we're not trying to get back to something we lost. Maybe we're building something entirely new." She didn't respond right away, then softly, "That sounds okay." I felt something settle in me, a kind of peace I hadn't known in decades. Not complete, not perfect, but real. Before she hung up, she said, "Would you come with me this weekend? I want to visit Mom again. I think it's time I talk to her." "Of course," I said, "whenever you're ready." That night I closed the photo album and placed it back on the shelf. The past would always be there, but so finally was the future. Saturday came with a sky streaked in quiet grey, the kind of weather that makes you speak in softer tones. Claire picked me up just after 10. We drove in silence most of the way, not out of awkwardness, but something else, something solemn, intentional. She wore a dark green sweater and had her mother's eyes, sharp, searching, full of unsaid things. When we arrived at the cemetery, she carried the same bouquet of white lilies as last time. We didn't rush. We walked slowly across the grass, through rows of names and dates and memories frozen in stone. Her mother's headstone came into view, loved fiercely. Claire stood there for a long while without speaking. I stayed a few steps behind, giving her space, letting her have this moment without my presence pushing in on it. Then she knelt down. "Hi, Mum," she said quietly. "I brought you lilies. I remember you used to say they were too delicate for the house, that they made everything feel too temporary." She gave a small, sad smile. "I think you were afraid of things that didn't last." Her voice didn't break, but it trembled. "I wish you were here. I wish you could tell me what to do with all of this anger, with this grief. I've been carrying it for so long, and I thought it was mine. But now I see, some of it was yours. Maybe most of it." I stayed back, still listening. "Dad's here," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "He's been showing up. Not perfectly, not in the ways I used to dream about, but he's trying. And for the first time, I'm letting him." She placed the flowers gently at the base of the stone. "I want to forgive him," she whispered. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I'm tired of holding this weight like it defines me." Then she stood and turned to me. "I'm ready," she said. We walked to the car together, and just before she opened the door, she stopped and looked at me. "She wasn't the villain," Claire said softly. "She was hurt, and so were you. I spent so many years thinking one of you had to be the enemy, but I don't think that's true anymore." "It never was," I said. "We both made mistakes, but we both loved you. That's the one thing we never got wrong." She nodded. When we got back in the car, the silence was different. Not heavy, not strained, just peaceful. Later, over lunch, she reached for her water and casually asked, "Do you want to come over next week? I'm thinking about repainting the living room." "I'd love that," I said. She smiled. We didn't talk about the cemetery again that day. We didn't need to. She had spoken to the silence, and somehow the silence had spoken back. The following Saturday, I showed up at Claire's apartment with 2 paint rollers, a tray, and more nervous energy than I wanted to admit. It had been decades since I'd painted a room with someone, and never with her. Not like this. She opened the door with her hair pulled back, wearing a faded college t-shirt and a smudge of primer on her cheek. She looked content, not overly cheerful, not theatrical. Just present. That was more than enough. "I picked a light grey," she said, leading me inside. "Something calm." "Perfect," I said. "I brought the rollers and snacks." She raised an eyebrow. "Snacks?" "Painting tradition," I said with mock seriousness. "You can't paint without peanut butter crackers." She actually laughed. We moved the furniture, spread drop cloths, and got to work. The smell of paint filled the room. The kind of smell that reminds you of starting over, of new beginnings disguised in little things like color choices and clean corners. At first, we talked about light stuff, her co-worker who microwaved fish, my terrible driving playlist, the neighbor who played trumpet at midnight, but slowly we drifted into deeper waters. "You were scared to be a dad, weren't you?" she asked, not accusing, just curious. I stopped mid-roll. I was terrified. "Why?" I leaned the roller against the wall. "Because I came from nothing," I said. "My dad left before I was old enough to remember him. My mom worked 2 jobs and still couldn't look me in the eye half the time. I didn't know how to love without fear." Claire didn't respond right away. She kept painting slow, steady strokes. "And when you were born," I continued, "I held you and felt this wave of love so big it made me sick with panic. I knew I wasn't enough. I was already drowning in the marriage. I didn't want to fail you too." She paused, finally turning to me. "But you did fail me for a long time." "I did," I said, "and I hate that. but I never stopped loving you, even when I didn't show it." She looked at me, really looked, like she was seeing the broken pieces I'd tried to keep hidden, and maybe, just maybe, she was seeing her own reflection in them. "I think I stopped expecting perfection from you the day I realized I wasn't perfect either," she said quietly. "I spent years wanting you to beg, to grovel, but what I really needed was for you to just be here, to be real." "I'm real now," I said. She nodded. We finished the first coat in silence. Music played softly from her phone. A playlist of hers I didn't recognize, but I didn't ask. It was hers. That was enough. When we sat on the couch afterward, exhausted and stained with paint, she leaned her head on my shoulder. "This isn't forgiveness yet," she murmured, "but I think it's something close." I didn't speak. I just sat there, breathing in the scent of fresh paint, the warmth of her beside me, and the quiet, steady heartbeat of something that felt a lot like redemption. A month later, Claire invited me to a small gathering. Just a few friends. Nothing big, she said. Her birthday, 33, I brought a gift, not expensive, not flashy. Just a small leather-bound journal with her initials engraved in gold. Inside the cover I wrote, "For the stories you haven't told yet and the ones you're still learning how to forgive. With love, Dad." The party was simple. Laughter drifted in and out of rooms. There was music playing low. I stood mostly off to the side, sipping iced tea, watching her move through the space like someone who had learned how to belong. At one point, I saw her talking to a friend, and she gestured toward me. "That's my dad," she said. I heard it, clear as day. My dad. Two words that had once felt like they belonged to someone else. Later, after everyone left, we sat on her balcony. The Denver night was cool, the city lights flickering softly in the distance. She turned to me, quiet. "You know," she said, "I used to imagine what I'd say to you if I ever got the chance. I rehearsed speeches, whole monologues. Did you ever use one?" She smiled faintly. "No, none of them fit when it actually happened. Because you weren't the man I was angry at anymore." I nodded slowly. "I think I kept you frozen in time," she said. "The dad who left, the one who didn't show up. I didn't know how to let that version of you grow. I didn't know how to grow past him either," I admitted. She was quiet for a long moment, then said something I'll never forget. "Forgiveness isn't a line you cross, it's a road, and I'm still walking it." "I'll walk it with you," I said. She didn't respond right away, but then she reached for my hand. Not for support, not out of pity, but something simple, something strong. Connection. "I'm not done grieving what we lost," she said. "I don't think I ever will be." Me neither. "But I think I finally stopped punishing myself for loving you." Tears slid down my cheeks. I didn't hide them. We sat there side by side, saying nothing more. And maybe that was the most honest part of all. The silence that no longer hurt, no longer accused. It simply held space for both of us. We would never have the childhood memories we missed, never rewrite the past. But we had this. A beginning, a new chapter. One written not in guilt or anger, but in grace. Now I want to hear your voice. Have you ever had to forgive someone in your family, even when they never apologized? Tell me in the comments. Don't hold back. Your story matters, and someone else out there might need to read it today. If this story touched something in your heart, share it with someone who needs healing too. Subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into forgiveness and family. And if you're ready for another emotional story, one that might just change the way you see your own past, watch the next video appearing right here on the screen. I'll be there with you.